Voter ID is now coming to millions of voters when they go to the polls. The Supreme Court ruling striking down that key section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act has prompted some new moves in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and North Carolina. The controversial 5-4 decision declared that race and voting, well, they've drastically changed in the last 5 decades, making federal oversight in some southern states unnecessary. But President Obama and other critics have branded that ruling a stinging setback for voting rights, saying it will lead to voter suppression for millions. Well, the Republican Attorney General of the Lone Star State joins us now from Austin, Greg Abbott, where voter ID will be implemented. Mr. Attorney General, welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Eric, great to be with you.
When this ruling came down, you've announced that you're going to start voter ID. Obviously, Lone Star State voters will now need it.
Right. See, part of the backdrop of the Supreme Court decision striking down this pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act was the fact that in Texas we had passed a voter ID law a couple of years ago that the United States Department of Justice was not allowing us to implement, despite the fact that voter ID has already been pre-approved by the United States Supreme Court and allowed in other states. So it showed that the way this pre-clearance process was being used was discriminatory against some states not being allowed to employ the very same voter integrity laws that other states are allowed to use.
You know, what the critics say, they say that it will lead to suppression of minorities, of the elderly, of the young people who don't have voter ID. I mean, look, it's not what happened. Why Bloody Sunday happened in Selma, why people died for their right to vote in this country. What is your reaction to those who say it suppresses the vote? I mean, you may have to drive, what, 300 miles some places to get a voter ID in Texas? I mean, who's going to do that?
Those criticisms are false for several reasons. First, Eric, it's very important for people to understand that in the states that have employed voter ID laws, minority participation has actually increased, not decreased. Second, the United States Supreme Court has already upheld the constitutionality of voter ID laws, and when it did so, it said, sure, there are some inconveniences that go along with getting a voter ID. However, those inconveniences are not voter suppression, and those inconveniences do not make the voter ID law unconstitutional. So these are issues that have already been argued about. But the third thing, Eric, that's so very important here, and that is just because this pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act has been stricken down, it does not mean that all the robust protections of the Voting Rights Act are gone. If someone feels like they've been discriminated against because of voter ID or some other law, they still have recourse to the courts to try to have that law stricken down. So really, all of these protections, protecting minorities, protecting those who demand their right to vote, are still going to be there to help them.
And in 15 seconds, I'm sorry we're running out of time because of breaking news, but what do Texas voters have to do now? And what if they don't have an ID? What do they do? Where do they go?
Texas, to make sure that everyone is going to have the right to vote, Texas is going to provide a photo ID for them for free. They just need to ask for it, and they will get it for absolute free, so they will be able to go to the polls and vote in the upcoming election.
All right, Attorney General Greg Abbott, thanks so much. I apologize for having a short segment today. Clearly, it's a big issue, and we'll stay on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric.